So we want to do some work on looking at the history in Case Ratio Online. So on the history tab, the first thing down the left hand side, you'll find various categories of documents. These are sort of subfolders for the main history view. The default is that all of the categories will be showing, and certain documents will auto file into various subcategories. For example, if you create a letter on the file, you'd expect it to auto file into the correspondence. You'll often find documents in the funding tab, including when you process an account slip and you pick up, say, an invoice which needs to be paid, then that will automatically be filed into the funding folder. You can also create new categories for yourself. If you're hovering over Select All and you right click, you can create a category. You can give it whatever name you like, and it will then appear in the left hand side of the menu for the history. You can keep on doing this. You can create subcategories within the category. And if you're finished with a particular category, for example, if you've created a category because you wanted to prepare a particular bundle which is now no longer required, you can then delete the category to try and keep the history a little bit tidier. So moving on, one of the difficulties in using the history is quite how full these histories can get with various different types of documents, including Word documents, notes relating to the matter, so history notes, PDFs, JPEGs and other image files, and of course emails as well, particularly those that auto-file between internal members of the Tuckers team. So lots of internal emails can end up on these histories as well. So it's good to be able to filter the histories quickly in order to be able to get to precisely what you want, and a lot of that is to do with correctly naming documents so that you find it easier to find them when you need them. However, we've also got these filter buttons which can help you narrow down what you need to be able to see. So the first thing is this focus view, and if you click on the focus view, that will by default limit the history view to just the document, so it will remove any notes from the history view. It will also, on a Crown Court file in particular, remove any digital case system files and any files that we've imported which have been served by disk relating to phone downloads. And probably most important of all, in terms of excluding documentation that you don't want to see on history, is the exclusion of the internal emails as well. So this focus view simply turns on and off by the slider, but under the filter you can also choose to restrict by category. Probably not necessary to do this in here because you can do that by clicking on the left hand side, although you can see here that you can just limit it to multiple categories, so more than one category, whereas the left hand side will only allow you to do one at a time. You can limit it by different file types, so if you just want emails or you just want PDFs, you can limit it on the basis that you're looking for emails which just have an attachment. You can do to and from in terms of the date of the history that you want to search. You can exclude categories as well as including categories, and again that can be done on the basis that you can exclude more than one category, and you can exclude internal emails with a click of that button as well. So there's lots of functionality within the filter in terms of narrowing the history view. You can remove all the filters with the remove filter button, but by far and away the most straightforward way to get to the focused view, just documents and excluding internal emails, is this focus view here. And then the next thing you can do is in these headers you can make any search you wish, which again is why the naming convention is so important. Where you have incoming and outgoing emails, you can also search by recipient and or sender, as well as being able to limit to sent items or received items. So using these headers to further restrict the history view. The next bit of understanding how to use the history is these functions down the left hand side of the screen. So the tick boxes are there to be able to highlight a document, and from there we'll show you that you can download the document, attach it to an email, but that is the selection tick. Then next to that is a plus button, which will just give you slightly more information about the document itself. So as we unbundle that, you'll see the file size, created date, who it was modified by, and any date on which it was modified. And that's really just a subset of the information that you can see in the history properties button. Here you can see we've got the details of which category this document is in, and we can also use this to add it to more than one category if we wish. We can change the history description entirely from here if you want to rename it for any reason. You can add any particular note relating to the item, so you can come back and view that in due course. You can see that this is the history date, which can be changed in order to move it to a different point on the history. And we've got created and modified dates here, and also how many times the document has been printed. If we consider a DCS document, so a document that's been imported into the history from the digital case system, then we can also see that there are additional history properties which relate to the details of the document within the DCS itself. So under this DCS button, you can see some quite technical information, but which includes, for example, the document number within the digital case system and the page number. So here it was only one page, so it runs from H9 to H9. Obviously, documents with multiple pages, you would see that appearing in the DCS detail within this history properties box. The next icon along is the icon which relates to central printing. If we click this, we can see a dialog box which confirms in this case that this document hasn't been printed, but we can use this button here to send this document to the central print tray, including being given the options as to whether there are any attachments to go with it or any other sort of comments for central print relating to this document. And once we've done anything we need to do in here, we would then confirm done, and we could see then that would move it into the central print tray. And assuming the document has been printed, we will see confirmation in here that the document has been printed. If we don't want it in the central print tray, we can delete it from here, and we can see back now again it's not sent to the central print tray. The final icon on the left hand side here is the view document button. So the distinction here is that most people have the preview window set up, so if I click anywhere in this row, I should get the preview window, which is adjustable by hovering over the barrier between the preview window and the description and holding left click, and I can slide that open and closed. The documents can take some time to open depending on how large they are, but we can see that the Word documents and the PDFs, they're sort of viewable, but they're not brilliant in terms of how they resize. Much more straightforward in terms of emails, in terms of scrolling through these, and how quickly and how easily they resize in that preview window. Whereas this button here, rather than dealing with the preview window, opens up the document in a completely separate browser tab. This obviously gives you the advantage of being able to see the document much more clearly, given that you've got the whole window available. It also enables you to edit the document and save and close in order to close the document and save it to the history of the file. So we'll move on to the toolbar on the top right hand side of the screen. So the first icon here is what we call the Tucker's Mini Cloud. So the purpose of this button is if you're trying to email documents and if they are larger in total than 25 meg, then you won't be able to email them. So what we do here is we've created a mini cloud button. You can click this button. You can provide a description for the documents that you're sending. It will default a password. You can set an expiry date, and when you press submit, it will create a draft email. And this draft email will include a link to the documentation and a password to access the documentation. Now, there are some complexities in terms of the recipient being able to manage the information, because the information they receive will be in the form of a zip file. So there is some guidance created in the email here as to how people can extract the documentation, but you may need to talk a recipient through the fact that they're going to receive an email enclosing documentation in this zip form. But there's a separate video on that. I'll put the link in this video so you can use the longer video to understand the details of using the Tucker's Mini Cloud. The next icon along is the Refresh History button. The history is effectively a web page, but it's a static web page, which gives you some more stability in terms of it not needing the connection to the internet to be permanent and stable. However, the flip side of that is that when you do create a new document and you want to view that document on the history, it won't download automatically. You'll just need to click this Refresh History button. It's a pretty fast refresh, and it's better than this Reload Page button, which will reload the whole page rather than just refreshing the history. This Reload Page is similar to the Browser Reload Page refresh button, but so this is the better button to use if you just want a quick refresh of the documents on the history. The next icon along is the Combine History Items button. So this enables us to create bundles of documents. We can multi-select, and these documents can be in the form of PDFs or emails, and we can click the Combine History Items button. We get to then name our document. We can add an index as the first page of the document. We can paginate the bundle if we want. And this question here, possibly a little bit more confusing, do you want to exclude the attachments on emails that are already included in the merge separately? So what we're saying here is that where you've got emails on the history, but also their attachments are separately stored on the history, yes would then exclude the attachments being duplicated. So you'd have the attachment from the email and the attachment that's already on the history. This yes button would exclude that duplication. If you click no here, it will create the email with its attachments, and if the attachments are already separately on the history, you will end up with duplicate documents. When we click save, you'll get a message here to the effect that the history items are being combined on the server, and it's only when you get an email to confirm that the documents have been combined that you should then proceed. However, you will get that email very quickly depending on the size of the document. In this case, I only combined a couple of documents, so I've not created a very big bundle. You can create a document up to 300 megabytes. And so here we just created a quick bundle with a couple of documents, including the index, which is hyperlinked, so I can get to the documents by using the index. So that is the Combine History button. To the right of that is the Delete button. So if you have items on the history which have been created in error, you can use the red delete item to make them go away. Please be careful when deleting. It's not easy to restore deleted documents when they have been deleted deliberately from the history. The next icon along is the Move History or Assign Category button. If we click this icon, it will give us a number of different functions. So the first option is to click if we want to retain a copy on the source file, and that will give us the ability to simply copy a document on our file and create an additional copy on the history of this case by just using the copy button. We can remove the matter number and then select matter, and that will enable us to search the database in order to move, or rather copy in this case, the documents to a different matter number. If we do not have this option ticked, then when we select here without the copy button ticked, we are going to move the documentation. So we're going to move the documents from this file onto the other file and not retain a copy on this existing history. And the other thing you can do within this function is you can allocate the documents to a particular category on your history. The advantage here being that rather than having to use the history properties button and allocate the category one by one, you can multi-select documents, and using the assign button and the categories, you can assign multiple documents to a category in one go. Moving over, we have the email button. There are a number of different ways to email from the history. In this case, I've already selected a couple of documents, and by doing so, when I click the email button, it will bring up the dialog, which includes the email addresses for the contacts that are linked to this case. I can then choose a contact to send the email to, and the email it creates will obviously save automatically to this particular file, but it already includes the two attachments that I've selected when I was selecting the files directly from the history. So that's just one of the ways to email from the case, is this email button here. The next button along is the select and download button. Here I'm working within my history. Having selected these documents, I can download, and they will go into the downloads folder on my device, although the precise folder they go into is controlled by the browser. So if you want them to go into a folder that is different to your downloads folder, that can be set up in the browser, but by default in most browsers it will go into your download folder. If you download more than 5 attachments or 5 documents in one go, what this will do is it won't just download the individual documents, it will actually zip them up and create a folder, and then you will have to be aware that having done that, in your downloads it will have created a zip file, which does mean that you will have to extract the documents before you can view them. Just in the same way that we can download to the desktop, we can also upload files to the history of the case. Two main ways of doing that. Firstly, we can go into the downloads folder itself or any folder on the desktop, and we can simply drag and drop onto the history. The alternative way of doing that would have been to use this button here, the last icon on the history. This is upload to the history. We will click the button. It will take us again by default probably into our downloads folder. If I select some files to upload, okay, we can see here we can control the categories to which they're allocated. We can change the description that they're going to go onto the history. We can upload the documents individually at this stage, or we can decide we didn't want that document after all, or we can upload them all together using the Save All Files button at the top. So that's the history screen in Case Ratio Online.